Every time the man came home, he would throw a piece of poisoned beef into the community's grassland, then casually enter the elevator and descend to the 5th floor. But one day, the elevator unexpectedly stopped on the 3rd floor. The man quickly hid in a corner to avoid being seen by the woman outside. Luckily, he reacted quickly, and the woman did not notice anyone in the elevator. As the woman was busy searching through her bag, the man quickly moved to the other side of the elevator and repeatedly pressed the door close but. The woman seemed to notice a figure flash in the elevator, and she was about to approach and investigate. Just then, the elevator door suddenly closed, and the man inside finally breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out this was not his home, but an apartment he had rented before, so he couldn't let the neighbors notice him. Standing by the balcony, the man looked at the dog outside that had died from the poisoned beef. Every time he sneaked into the current homeowner's house, the dog would bark non-stop, so he decided to poison it to avoid future trouble. The man's name was Mark, a senior executive at an advertising company. But a few months ago, the company suddenly fired him, citing his age of 40 as the reason. At first, Mark didn't take it seriously. He believed that the connections he had built over the years could easily help him land a job at another company. The next morning, he went to his close friend's company to seek a position. But when his friend found out, he was very surprised that such a prominent figure would come to his company for a job. He immediately had his assistant prepare an employment contract. However, when Mark took the contract to sign, he noticed something strange. It was labeled as an internship contract, with a note saying that during the 3-month internship period, there would be no salary. Mark thought it was a mistake, as he was a veteran in the industry and couldn't possibly be offered an internship. But the assistant insisted that it was what his boss had instructed. Mark was shocked to realize that his old friend had turned him into cheap labor. Without a source of income, Mark and his family had to move from their luxury apartment to a small, rundown house in the suburbs, and his son had to transfer from a private school to a public one. Looking at their new, dirty environment, Mark couldn't accept it. Why did others get to live in big mansions while he had to endure this? Feeling frustrated, he kept kicking the car door to vent his anger, but quickly regretted it afterward. This BMW was his last shred of dignity. One day, Mark noticed a spare key under the driver's seat. It was the backup key from his previous luxury apartment. A wicked thought suddenly crossed his mind, and that night, he drove to the building. Watching the new owner's family enjoying themselves, Mark felt bitterness in his heart. He glared at the family for a long time, as if they had taken everything from him. The next day, Mark waited outside the apartment, observing the family's every move. After they left, he took out the spare key and entered the apartment. As he closed the door, the neighbor's dog started barking, sensing Mark's scent. Luckily, Mark quickly hid inside, and the neighbor didn't notice anything unusual. Once inside, Mark was familiar with every corner of the apartment. While rummaging through a drawer, he found a red disc labeled One Day, with 5 such discs in total. Mark also found a folder titled Accident on the computer. Inside were photos of the wife and daughter injured in a car crash, and from the police report, it appeared the husband had been drunk driving when the accident occurred. While searching further on the computer, Mark found a memo that indicated the husband had a meeting at the church that evening. Mark decided to follow him. As expected, the husband, Nick, arrived at the church at 8 p.m. and entered a small room. At that moment, a woman across the room waved at Mark. She seemed to recognize that it was his first time in such a place and invited him to take a seat. As they conversed, Mark learned that the group was an alcohol recovery support group, and people gathered there every night to share their experiences. Seeing this as an opportunity to get closer to Nick, Mark shared his own tragic story, claiming he had a happy family before a drunk driving accident ruined their lives, and he had vowed to give up alcohol. Mark's speech caught Nick's attention since their stories were similar. Nick, introducing himself, mentioned that he worked as the vice president of a logistics company, and that his wife was the daughter of the company's owner. Mark thought to himself that moving Nick would not be as simple as it seemed, and would require careful planning. Nick's wife called during their conversation, and Mark pretended it was a call from his company's secretary. Before leaving, Mark paid for their coffee, and when he got home, his wife asked why he hadn't answered her calls. Mark lied, claiming he had been negotiating a big deal and didn't want to be disturbed. The next day, to prevent the neighbor's dog from ruining his plans, Mark threw a piece of poisoned beef into the grass of the community, setting the stage for the opening scene. Back at home, Mark deleted all the daughter-related notes from the computer and synced the files to his phone. That evening, Mark arrived early at a bar near the school, where he witnessed Nick and his wife having a heated argument. Nick had forgotten his daughter's school pickup time, and his wife was suspicious that he had been drinking again. After they left, Mark caught Nick's eye from across the street, and when Nick noticed him, Mark quickly ducked into the women's restroom, relieved that Nick had left disappointed. The next day, Mark intentionally ran into Nick at a coffee shop, and they had another conversation. To make Nick feel more at ease, Mark showed him pictures of his wife and daughter, mentioning that their children were about the same age. Nick invited Mark to dinner at his home. This gave Mark a legitimate reason to visit the apartment, and he dressed up for the occasion. While waiting for security to open the door, Mark noticed a lawn worker walking by. Worried the worker might recognize him, Mark pretended to scratch his head in irritation, but the worker still called out his name. Mark quickly acted surprised and greeted the worker. The worker asked why Mark, who had moved out of the apartment, was there. Mark explained it was a mix-up with a delivery address, and that he was there to pick up a package. When Nick left the elevator, the worker finally left, and Mark relaxed. Inside the apartment, Mark complimented the decor, but Nick would never suspect it had once been Mark's home. During dinner, Nick and his wife argued over a trivial matter. matter, and Mark saw an opportunity to intervene and calm the situation. After dinner, he offered to help Nick's wife clean up the dishes, trying to get her attention. The next day, when Nick and his daughter left the apartment, they were stopped by the lawn worker, who asked about the previous tenant. Nick was puzzled, but the worker quickly apologized, saying he must have made a mistake. Meanwhile, Mark, waiting in the underground parking lot, knew it was time for his next move. He deliberately crashed his car into the wall. Later, he called Nick, and when Nick arrived, Mark pretended to be drunk and spilled alcohol on Nick's clothes, creating a scene that would spark a confrontation between Nick and his wife. Afterward, Mark claimed his phone had died and asked to borrow Nick's phone. While Nick was outside cleaning the alcohol off, Mark sent himself a message from Nick's phone. This moment would play a crucial role in the unfolding plot. Later, when Nick returned home, his wife noticed the strong smell of alcohol on him and confronted him, accusing him of secretly drinking. Nick explained that he had been helping Mark after his accident, but his wife didn't believe him. To back up his story, Mark showed her the email Nick had sent asking for his help. Mark then added peanut oil to a can of eye spray and took it with him to handle any situation that might arise. The next day, he handed over the stolen clothing to the lawn worker, but the worker's demands grew bolder. He wanted Mark to install a hidden camera in Nick's daughter's room. Mark refused, as he had his limits, but due to the leverage the worker had on him, he agreed to help. That night, Mark tampered with the worker's tools, deciding it would be better for the worker to disappear. The next day, Mark met with Nick and confessed everything. Nick, unable to hold back, attacked Mark, and during the struggle, the lawn worker was accidentally injured by the tools. By the time the police arrived, Nick was taken for questioning. Later, Nick's wife invited Mark to her home and asked him to write a letter of apology. Mark agreed, saying he would do anything if she was willing. Before leaving, he gave her the tampered eye spray for safekeeping. Over the following days, Mark learned that Nick's daughter liked gymnastics and used all his savings to arrange a meeting between her and a famous celebrity. Now, Mark felt less like an outsider and more like part of their family. Before leaving, he sent photos to Nick, intentionally provoking him. That night, Nick confronted his wife, but after drinking, he became uncontrollable. In a moment of crisis, Nick's wife used the eye spray Mark had given her, and Nick collapsed in pain, unable to speak. In her panic, she called Mark for help. Mark had been waiting downstairs, and he assured her everything would be taken care of. He went upstairs, and as Nick lay unconscious, Mark smothered him, killing him. Since Nick's father-in-law was a wealthy businessman, they were able to cover up Nick's death as a suicide. In the final scenes of the film, Mark took Nick's position as vice president of the logistics company.